Imagine a world more than 6,000 years ago, long before the rise of modern nations, skyscrapers, or even the written word as we know it today. Picture vast landscapes stretching endlessly, a mix of arid deserts, rolling plains, and fertile river valleys that would one day shape the destiny of humanity. In this world, people were largely nomadic, moving from place to place in search of food, water, and safety. Life was uncertain. Survival depended on knowledge of the land, the ability to hunt, and the wisdom to adapt to changing seasons and harsh conditions. In such a world, human communities were small, scattered, and largely self-sufficient. Social structures were rudimentary, and cultural development was limited by the constant struggle for survival. Yet, amidst this harsh environment, remarkable things began to happen. In a region that would later be known as Mesopotamia, meaning the land between rivers, human beings started to experiment with something revolutionary. They began to settle in one place, cultivating the soil, domesticating animals, and building permanent homes. This region, cradled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, offered fertile soil, access to water, and a climate conducive to agriculture. The rivers, while unpredictable, provided life, giving irrigation that could sustain crops year-round. Here, humans transitioned from a nomadic lifestyle to a sedentary one, marking the first steps toward organized society, urbanization, and ultimately, civilization itself. It is within this extraordinary backdrop that the Sumerians emerged. They were not the first humans to live in Mesopotamia, but they were the ones who took the boldest steps in shaping human society as we recognize it today. Unlike the scattered hunter-gatherer groups around them, the Sumerians developed structured communities, built monumental architecture, and created systems of governance that allowed their society to flourish. Their achievements were not limited to survival. They ventured into the realms of creativity, culture, and knowledge, laying foundations that would influence generations to come. Who exactly were the Sumerians? Historians and archaeologists have pieced together fragments of their lives from ancient ruins, clay tablets, and artifacts scattered across southern Mesopotamia. They were a people of vision, ingenuity, and determination. Living in city-states such as Uruk, and Eridu, they transformed a challenging and sometimes unforgiving environment into thriving centers of civilization. Each city-state functioned independently, governed by its own ruler, and dedicated to a specific patron deity, yet they shared a common language, culture, and set of innovations that distinguished them from neighboring peoples. The Sumerians' emergence was not accidental. It was the result of a convergence of factors: geography, climate, social necessity, and human ingenuity. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers, for instance, were both a blessing and a challenge. Their annual floods deposited rich silt onto the land, creating fertile soil ideal for agriculture. However, these floods were unpredictable and could be destructive. To manage this, the Sumerians developed sophisticated irrigation systems, digging canals, building levees, and designing reservoirs. These systems allowed them to control water flow, expand arable land, and ensure stable food supplies. With reliable agriculture, populations grew, settlements expanded, and cities began to form. As these early urban centers grew, the Sumerians faced new challenges that required innovative solutions. Large populations demanded organization, coordination, and rules. Trade became increasingly important, as not all resources were locally available. Metals, timber, and precious stones had to be imported, while surplus grain, pottery, and textiles could be exported. To facilitate trade, the Sumerians developed standardized weights and measures, a precursor to economic systems that would later define entire civilizations. They also created a writing system, Cuneiform, to keep records of trade, taxes, and agreements, a revolutionary development that allowed knowledge to be preserved, laws to be codified, and stories to be told across generations. Beyond practical innovations, the Sumerians cultivated a rich cultural and religious life. Their society was deeply spiritual, with every aspect of daily life influenced by belief in gods who controlled the natural and human world. Temples, or ziggurats, dominated city skylines, serving as centers of worship, administration, and education. Priests wielded considerable influence, mediating between the divine and the human, while kings derived authority not only from power but also from perceived divine favor. Festivals, rituals, and myths permeated daily life, reflecting the Sumerians' desire to understand the universe, explain natural phenomena, and maintain social cohesion. The Sumerians' contributions to human civilization are staggering. They were the first to invent writing, giving us a tool to communicate across time. They developed mathematics, astronomy, and law, forming systems that would inspire future empires such as the Babylonians and Assyrians. They built monumental architecture, cultivated art and literature, and structured society in ways that allowed large populations to live together, cooperate, and thrive. Their influence extends far beyond their own era. The principles they established became the blueprint for all subsequent civilizations in the region and eventually the world. But the story of the Sumerians is more than just a list of achievements. It is the story of human ingenuity and resilience. It is the story of people who looked at rivers that could both nourish and destroy and found ways to harness them. It is the story of communities that moved from survival to creativity, from instinct to strategy, and from chaos to order. In the vast timeline of human history, the Sumerians occupy a pivotal position. They remind us that civilization does not appear spontaneously. It is built piece by piece by people daring to innovate, organize, and imagine a better world. As we explore the history of the Sumerians, we must consider their world not through the lens of modern convenience, but through the lens of human struggle and aspiration. Every brick they laid, every canal they dug, every story they inscribed in clay was a step toward the civilization we inherit today. They were pioneers, not in the sense of discovering new lands, but in discovering the potential of human society itself. Their cities were laboratories of human organization, their innovations experiments in communication, trade, and governance, and their culture a testament to the enduring power of creativity and belief. Understanding the Sumerians is not just about understanding the past, it is about understanding the origins of what it means to be human in society. When we look at modern cities, legal systems, literature, and technology, we are, in a way, seeing the echoes of their ingenuity. The roads we walk, the books we read, the laws we follow, all carry traces of the Sumerian imagination. Their legacy is a reminder that civilization is not an abstract concept, but a living inheritance, built by ordinary people striving to create order, meaning, and beauty in a complex and often unforgiving world. In the next chapters of our exploration, we will delve deeper into the land of Sumer, the city, states they built, the society they structured, and the innovations they pioneered. But before we do, it is worth pausing to reflect on this remarkable beginning, a small group of people in southern Mesopotamia who, through vision, courage, and ingenuity, set the stage for the rise of civilization itself. In their story, we find the roots of everything we know as culture, governance, technology, and community. In their story, we find the first chapter of human history. The land of Sumer, stretching across the southern reaches of Mesopotamia, was unlike any other place known to the people of the ancient world. It was a region defined by extremes, yet brimming with potential. On the surface, it could appear harsh and unforgiving, a mixture of arid plains and unpredictable rivers. The Tigris and Euphrates, the twin lifelines of the region, flowed through the land with a power and unpredictability that could both nurture and destroy. Their waters, rich with silt, made the soil incredibly fertile, creating an opportunity for early agriculture that no other nearby region could offer to the same extent. Yet these same rivers, when unchecked, could flood violently, washing away crops and homes alike, reminding the people of Sumer that nature was both a benefactor and a threat. The geography of Sumer was instrumental in shaping the people who settled there. Unlike mountainous regions, which offered natural protection but limited agricultural land, Sumer was a vast alluvial plain. This flat landscape allowed for large-scale farming and the establishment of permanent settlements. The abundance of clay and mud from the riverbanks became a crucial building material, enabling the construction of homes, walls, and temples. At the same time, the scarcity of stone and timber meant that the Sumerians had to innovate, relying on bricks and mud to build structures that could withstand both time and the occasional flood. The environment forced adaptation and ingenuity at every turn, and the Sumerians rose to meet these challenges with remarkable creativity. The climate of southern Mesopotamia played a central role in the development of Sumerian society. The region experienced long, hot summers and mild winters, a climate that could be both rewarding and punishing for early farmers. Crops such as barley, wheat, and dates thrived under these conditions, but only if water was carefully managed. Seasonal floods of the Tigris and Euphrates deposited nutrient-rich silt across the land, replenishing the soil and creating ideal conditions for planting. However, these floods were inconsistent and often destructive, which meant that relying solely on nature was not enough. To survive and prosper, the Sumerians had to exert control over their environment, a need that would drive many of their most significant innovations. Irrigation was the cornerstone of Sumerian agriculture. By digging canals, building levees, and creating reservoirs, they were able to redirect river waters to fields that would otherwise remain dry. This careful management of water transformed the land into a reliable source of food, supporting not just survival but growth. Agriculture became the foundation of Sumerian society, enabling a surplus that allowed people to pursue activities beyond mere subsistence. Farmers could now produce more than they needed for themselves, creating opportunities for trade, specialization, and the rise of urban centers. The rivers that once seemed unpredictable became the arteries of a thriving civilization, and the land itself was slowly molded into a canvas for human ingenuity. The Sumerians' relationship with their land was not just practical, it was also deeply spiritual. They recognized the immense power of the Tigris and Euphrates and believed that their lives were intertwined with the forces of nature. Water was sacred, as was the soil that produced their crops. Each successful harvest was seen as a blessing, while floods or droughts were interpreted as signs of divine displeasure. This spiritual connection reinforced the importance of agriculture and land management, embedding the rhythms of nature into the very fabric of Sumerian culture. Farming was not simply a means of survival, it was a sacred duty, a way of participating in the ongoing creation and maintenance of life. The fertility of Sumer made it a magnet for human settlement. People who had once been nomadic began to gather in permanent villages, attracted by the promise of abundant food and the opportunity to establish more complex social structures. Over time, these villages grew into towns, and the towns eventually became city-states. Uruk, Lagash, and Eridu were among the earliest of these urban centers, each strategically located near river channels or trade routes. Their positions allowed for both agricultural prosperity and access to resources that were scarce in the surrounding plains. The land dictated where people could live, but human ingenuity dictated how they would thrive there. Trade was another crucial aspect shaped by the land of Sumer. While the plains were fertile and productive, they lacked essential resources such as stone, timber, and metals. To obtain these materials, the Sumerians established trade networks that extended far beyond their immediate region. They traded surplus grain, crafted goods, and textiles in exchange for copper, tin, gold, and timber. These networks connected Sumer to distant regions, fostering cultural exchange, technological development, and economic growth. The land provided the foundation for agriculture, but trade allowed Sumerian society to expand its horizons, both materially and intellectually. The natural challenges of the land also encouraged the Sumerians to develop organized labor and governance. Building irrigation systems, maintaining canals, and protecting against floods required coordinated effort. Individual families could not accomplish these tasks alone. They required collective organization. This need led to the establishment of city-states, each with a ruler or governing body capable of mobilizing resources, directing labor, and maintaining order. The geography and climate of Sumer, therefore, directly influenced the emergence of political structures, laying the groundwork for governance as we understand it today. The land also influenced Sumerian architecture and city planning. With clay abundant and stone scarce, the Sumerians became master builders of mud, brick structures. They constructed homes, walls, and temples designed to withstand both the climate and seasonal floods. Cities were carefully planned, with streets, marketplaces, and religious centers arranged to facilitate both commerce and social cohesion. Ziggurats, towering temple complexes built at the heart of cities, were not only religious centers but also symbols of human mastery over the environment. These monumental structures reflected the Sumerians' understanding of their land and their desire to organize society in a way that harmonized with natural and spiritual forces. Daily life in Sumer was intimately connected to the land. Farmers tended fields along the riverbanks, watching the seasonal changes and adjusting planting cycles accordingly. Shepherds guided flocks through the plains, ensuring that both livestock and crops could coexist. Artisans and laborers worked in workshops and construction sites, relying on materials sourced from the surrounding environment. The rhythms of work, trade, and worship were all tied to the land, creating a society deeply rooted in its physical surroundings. The land of Sumer also shaped the Sumerians' world view and mythology. Many of their gods were associated with natural elements: the sky, the earth, water, and the sun. Flood myths, agricultural deities, and cosmic stories all reflected the intimate relationship between people and their environment. By understanding and venerating the forces of nature, the Sumerians developed a cultural framework that guided both practical life and spiritual belief. Their myths were not abstract fantasies. They were reflections of the daily realities imposed by the land they inhabited. In addition, the land of Sumer played a role in fostering technological innovation. The challenges posed by irrigation, agriculture, and urban living required creative solutions. Tools for farming, methods for water management, and techniques for building all evolved in direct response to environmental conditions. The land was not merely a passive backdrop. it was an active participant in shaping human ingenuity. Each canal dug, each brick laid, and each field cultivated was a testament to the dynamic interaction between people and their surroundings. The Sumerians' mastery of their land allowed them to develop surplus production, which in turn fueled social complexity. With enough food to support non-farming populations, individuals could specialize as artisans, priests, scribes, and traders. This specialization fostered innovation, cultural expression, and intellectual growth. Cities became hubs of learning, commerce, and religion, all made possible by the careful harnessing of the natural environment. The land of Sumer was thus both a challenge and an opportunity, demanding ingenuity while offering immense rewards. Even the risks of the land contributed to Sumerian resilience. Droughts, floods, and resource shortages forced communities to plan, organize, and innovate. They learned to predict river behavior, construct storage facilities, and develop agricultural calendars. Each challenge strengthened social cohesion and reinforced the importance of governance, trade, and collective effort. The environment taught the Sumerians that survival depended not only on strength or courage, but also on wisdom, foresight, and cooperation. As Sumerian cities grew, the relationship between land and society became increasingly complex. Canals and reservoirs transformed natural landscapes into managed agricultural zones. Cities expanded along fertile riverbanks, with marketplaces, temples, and administrative buildings strategically positioned. The land dictated settlement patterns, influenced social organization, and inspired both technology and culture. In Sumer, humans did not merely live on the land. They interacted with it, shaped it, and revered it. The land of Sumer also influenced the development of Sumerian science and mathematics. Precise measurement of fields, water channels, and construction projects required understanding geometry, arithmetic, and observation. The need to manage water, distribute resources, and plan urban layouts encouraged the development of mathematical principles that would later influence civilizations far beyond Mesopotamia. Their intimate knowledge of their environment led to advancements in astronomy, surveying, and engineering, demonstrating that practical necessity often drives intellectual achievement. Trade, religion, governance, technology, and culture all were deeply intertwined with the land. The Sumerians' achievements were inseparable from the fertile plains, the unpredictable rivers, and the materials provided by the environment. Without the land of Sumer, their cities might never have arisen, their innovations might never have occurred, and their civilization might have remained a fleeting moment in history. But by understanding and shaping their environment, the Sumerians created a legacy that would endure for millennia, demonstrating that the interaction between humans and their land is at the heart of civilization itself. In essence, the land of Sumer was both a teacher and a partner. It demanded respect, ingenuity, and collaboration, and in return, it offered abundance, opportunity, and the possibility of lasting achievement. The Tigris and Euphrates, the fertile plains, and the clay-rich soil all combined to form a stage on which human creativity and resilience could unfold. The story of the Sumerians is inseparable from the story of the land they inhabited, a land that shaped them, challenged them, and ultimately allowed them to thrive. Through the lens of the Sumerians, we see the profound impact that geography and environment have on human history. Their cities, innovations, and culture were direct responses to the opportunities and challenges presented by their land. By studying the land of Sumer, we gain insight not only into the origins of agriculture and urban life, but also into the enduring relationship between humans and the world they inhabit. The fertile plains of southern Mesopotamia were more than a setting. They were the crucible in which civilization itself was forged. The story of Sumer is not just a story of land and rivers. It is the story of the people who learned to live together, to organize themselves, and to build something greater than any individual could accomplish. Central to this story is the concept of the city-state, a unique form of political and social organization that allowed the Sumerians to thrive in an environment that could be both generous and harsh. Unlike empires that later stretched across vast territories, Sumerian civilization was composed of independent city-states, each with its own ruler, its own patron deity, and its own identity. These city-states were the basic building blocks of Sumerian society, and through them, we can begin to understand the complexity, ingenuity, and organization of one of the world's first civilizations. The city-states of Sumer were remarkable in both their scale and their sophistication. Cities such as Uruk, Lagash, Eridu, and Nippur were bustling centers of population, commerce, religion, and governance. Unlike modern cities, which often grow organically, Sumerian cities were carefully planned, with residential areas, marketplaces, administrative buildings, and religious centers laid out in a deliberate order. At the heart of each city stood the ziggurat, a massive temple complex that served as both a religious and administrative hub. These ziggurats were constructed from sun-dried bricks and stood as symbols of human ingenuity, spiritual devotion, and political authority. From the top of a ziggurat, priests and rulers could oversee the city, both literally and metaphorically, reminding the people of the presence of divine and earthly power in their daily lives. Each city-state was governed by a ruler, often referred to as a lugal, meaning king, or in some cases a insi, a title that carried both political and religious significance. These leaders were not absolute monarchs in the modern sense, but were responsible for maintaining order, overseeing trade and agriculture, directing labor for public projects, and mediating between the gods and the people. The authority of the ruler was often intertwined with religious legitimacy. They were seen as chosen by the gods or as their representative on earth. This blending of religious and political authority was central to Sumerian governance, creating a system in which law, order, and faith were inseparable. The social structure within each city-state was highly organized and hierarchical. At the top of the hierarchy were the rulers and their families, followed by priests and priestesses who managed religious rituals and temple economies. These religious leaders controlled significant wealth, often owning large tracts of land and directing labor for temple construction and agricultural production. Beneath them were scribes, artisans, merchants, and craftsmen, skilled individuals whose labor supported the economy, culture, and daily functioning of the city. Scribes were especially important, as they were literate in Cuneiform, the writing system that recorded everything from trade transactions to laws, stories, and religious texts. At the base of the hierarchy were farmers, laborers, and servants, whose work in the fields and workshops sustained the entire city-state. While this social structure was rigid, it also allowed for mobility and specialization, enabling people to develop skills and contribute to the growth of their society in meaningful ways. Trade and commerce were central to the life of a Sumerian city-state. While the fertile land of southern Mesopotamia provided abundant crops, it lacked essential materials such as timber, stone, and metals. To acquire these resources, the Sumerians established extensive trade networks, reaching as far as Anatolia, the Persian Gulf, and the Indus Valley. Trade routes extended both overland and along rivers, with boats carrying goods such as grain, pottery, textiles, and crafted items. In exchange, the Sumerians imported timber for construction, precious stones for jewelry and metals like copper and tin for tools and weapons. These trade networks not only enriched the city-states economically, but also facilitated cultural exchange, introducing new ideas, technologies, and artistic styles that influenced Sumerian society. Religion played a central role in the organization of the city-state. Each city had its own patron deity, a god or goddess who was believed to protect the city and ensure its prosperity. Temples were not only places of worship, but also centers of economic activity, education, and governance. The temple controlled large estates, employed numerous workers, and managed trade and storage of surplus goods. Priests performed daily rituals, festivals, and offerings to honor the gods, while also overseeing the distribution of resources, collection of taxes, and maintenance of public infrastructure. In many ways, the temple acted as the heart of the city, intertwining spiritual life with political and economic functions. Law and justice were also critical components of Sumerian society. As cities grew and populations increased, disputes over land, trade, and resources became inevitable. The Sumerians developed legal codes, including some of the earliest known laws in human history, to regulate behavior and maintain social order. These codes addressed issues such as property rights, contracts, family law, and criminal offenses, reflecting a sophisticated understanding of justice and governance. The laws were publicly displayed on clay tablets, ensuring that all citizens were aware of the rules and the consequences of breaking them. This codification of law reinforced the authority of the city-state and helped maintain stability in a complex and growing society. The daily life of a Sumerian citizen was deeply intertwined with the city-state's organization. Farmers worked the land, producing food to feed the population, while artisans and craftsmen produced pottery, tools, textiles, and other goods. Merchants facilitated trade, both within the city and with distant regions, while scribes recorded transactions, religious texts, and historical events. The city's architecture, streets, and public spaces were carefully designed to support this complex web of activity, with marketplaces, workshops, temples, and administrative buildings arranged to optimize efficiency and social cohesion. Festivals, religious ceremonies, and public gatherings punctuated the rhythm of daily life, providing opportunities for social interaction, cultural expression, and reinforcement of shared values. Education was another key aspect of Sumerian society, particularly for those training as scribes or priests. Young students learned to read and write cuneiform, perform calculations, and study religious and literary texts. This education was essential for the administration of the city-state, as literate individuals managed trade, recorded laws, and preserved the cultural heritage of the Sumerians. Schools, often associated with temples, played a crucial role in maintaining knowledge across generations, ensuring that each city-state could continue to function effectively and adapt to new challenges. Military organization was also a critical feature of the city-state. While the Sumerians initially relied on small militias composed of farmers and laborers, over time they developed professional armies to protect their territories, defend trade routes, and assert dominance over rival city-states. Fortifications, such as walls and defensive towers, were constructed to protect urban centers, while weapons and strategies evolved to meet the demands of increasingly sophisticated warfare. The need for security reinforced the power of rulers and the organization of society, as citizens depended on coordinated defense and leadership to survive in a competitive and sometimes hostile environment. Despite their independence, city-states were not isolated. They engaged in diplomacy, trade alliances, and, at times, conflict with one another. Rivalries over land, water, and resources often led to wars. Yet these conflicts also spurred innovation, military strategy, and the development of political institutions. Alliances and treaties were negotiated to manage disputes, demonstrating the Sumerians' capacity for diplomacy and their understanding of the complexities of intercity relations. The interactions between city-states created a dynamic political landscape where cooperation and competition coexisted, shaping the development of Sumerian civilization as a whole. The arts and culture of Sumer were intimately connected to the city-state. Each city developed its own artistic styles, architectural designs, and literary traditions, reflecting local identity while sharing common cultural elements. Sculpture, pottery, jewelry, and musical instruments were produced for religious, ceremonial, and everyday use, showcasing the creativity and skill of Sumerian artisans. Literature, including myths, epics, hymns, and proverbs, preserved the values, beliefs, and history of each city-state, creating a shared cultural memory that transcended individual settlements. These cultural achievements were facilitated by the organization and resources provided by the city-state, illustrating how governance and society enabled artistic expression. The economic organization of the city-state was also remarkable. Surplus agricultural production allowed for specialization of labor, trade, and the accumulation of wealth. Temples, palaces, and workshops managed resources efficiently, directing labor toward public projects and religious ceremonies. Markets and trading centers enabled the exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies, both within the city and across regions. This economic complexity was supported by administrative systems, accounting methods, and record-keeping practices, demonstrating the sophistication of Sumerian governance and the integral role of the city-state in coordinating human activity. Women in Sumerian city-states had varied roles depending on social class, occupation, and family status. While elite women could own property, manage estates, and participate in religious life, most women worked within households, supporting agricultural and domestic activities. Some women became priestesses, scribes, or artisans, contributing to the cultural, economic, and spiritual life of the city. The organization of the city-state allowed for these diverse roles to exist, reflecting both social hierarchy and the opportunities created by urban complexity. In essence, the city-state was the lens through which Sumerians experienced life, organized society, and exercised innovation. It provided a framework for governance, religion, economy, education, defense, and culture, allowing human creativity and ingenuity to flourish. Without the city-state, the achievements of the Sumerians, writing, trade, monumental architecture, law, and art might never have reached the heights that they did. The city-state was more than a political entity. It was the heart of civilization itself, a microcosm in which humans learned to live together, solve complex problems, and leave a legacy that would endure for millennia. The emergence of city-states in Sumer demonstrates the power of collective human organization in response to environmental, social, and economic challenges. It shows how a society can transform from small, scattered settlements into complex urban centers capable of sustaining large populations, supporting specialization, and fostering cultural and technological advancement. The Sumerians' experience with city-states offers timeless lessons about the interdependence of individuals, communities, and governance, highlighting how cooperation, innovation, and structure can create societies that transcend the limitations of their environment. The Sumerians were not only builders of cities and organizers of complex societies. They were inventors and innovators in ways that would echo across millennia. Their ingenuity transformed daily life, shaped culture, and laid the foundation for human civilization itself. In examining the inventions and innovations of the Sumerians, one cannot help but marvel at how a society existing over 6,000 years ago could conceive ideas and tools that still influence the modern world. Their creativity arose from necessity, ambition, and curiosity, and it left an indelible mark on history. One of the most remarkable achievements of the Sumerians was the development of writing known as cuneiform. Before the invention of writing, communication was limited to spoken words, gestures, and simple symbols. This meant that knowledge, agreements, and stories could only be transmitted orally, which made them vulnerable to distortion and loss over generations. The Sumerians solved this problem by creating a system of symbols etched onto clay tablets using a stylus made from reeds. The marks resembled wedge shapes, hence the name cuneiform, derived from the Latin word cuneus, meaning wedge. Initially, cuneiform was used for practical purposes such as recording trade transactions, agricultural output, and taxes, but over time, it evolved into a medium for literature, law, and science. Through writing, the Sumerians preserved stories like the Epic of Gilgamesh, legal codes, hymns, and astronomical observations. This invention fundamentally changed human society, allowing knowledge to transcend generations and enabling civilization to accumulate and build upon past achievements. The wheel is another Sumerian innovation that profoundly shaped human history. While it is difficult to overstate the significance of the wheel, it is important to understand the context in which it emerged. The Sumerians first used wheels for pottery, spinning clay into vessels efficiently, which marked the beginning of a technological revolution in craftsmanship. Eventually, the wheel was adapted for transportation, giving rise to carts and wagons that could carry goods and people across land more efficiently than ever before. This seemingly simple invention transformed trade, agriculture, and warfare, facilitating the movement of resources, people, and ideas. The wheel allowed Sumerian society to expand its influence, reach distant lands, and establish trade networks that connected Mesopotamia to far-off regions. Mathematics and astronomy were also areas where Sumerian innovation shone brightly. The Sumerians developed a sophisticated numerical system based on the number 60, which is the origin of our modern 60, minute, hour, and 360-degree circle. This sexagesimal system allowed them to perform calculations for trade, land measurement, and architectural planning with remarkable precision. Their observations of celestial bodies led to early forms of astronomy as they tracked the movements of the sun, moon, and planets to create calendars that regulated agricultural cycles and religious festivals. By understanding patterns in the natural world, the Sumerians could predict floods, plan planting and harvesting, and schedule ceremonial events. Mathematics and astronomy were not abstract disciplines for the Sumerians. They were practical tools intimately connected to the survival and organization of their society. Agriculture itself was a field of innovation in Sumer. The Sumerians mastered the art of irrigation, digging canals and constructing levees to channel river water to fields. This allowed them to cultivate crops on a scale previously unimaginable, supporting large populations and creating surplus production. They developed plows to till the soil more efficiently and devised methods for crop rotation and storage to ensure a steady food supply. Their innovations in agriculture provided the foundation for urbanization, enabling people to specialize in non-farming professions, develop trade networks, and build complex societies. Without these agricultural innovations, the remarkable achievements of Sumerian civilization would have been impossible. The Sumerians were also pioneers in engineering and architecture. They built cities with streets, walls, drainage systems, and monumental structures that reflected both practicality and grandeur. The ziggurat, a towering temple complex at the center of each city, was perhaps the most iconic example of Sumerian architectural innovation. Ziggurats were constructed with mud bricks and often faced with baked bricks, creating a stepped structure that rose high above the city. These temples were not only places of worship, but also centers of administration, education, and economic activity. Constructing such monumental buildings required knowledge of materials, structural stability, and project management, a testament to the Sumerians' engineering skill. Trade and economic systems were also transformed by Sumerian innovation. They developed standardized weights and measures to facilitate fair exchange, created accounting methods using clay tokens, and established contracts documented in writing. These innovations allowed them to manage complex economies, track production and distribution, and ensure social stability. The Sumerians understood that a thriving society required not only agricultural surplus, but also a sophisticated system for managing resources, regulating trade, and resolving disputes. The Sumerians' ingenuity extended into metallurgy and crafts. While Mesopotamia lacked abundant natural resources such as stone and metals, the Sumerians were skilled in sourcing and utilizing what was available. They worked with copper, tin, and later bronze to create tools, weapons, and ceremonial objects. Artisans produced intricate jewelry, pottery, and sculptures that reflected both functional and aesthetic considerations. These crafts were not mere luxury items. They represented technological knowledge, artistic skill, and the ability to manipulate materials to serve social, religious, and practical purposes. Another remarkable area of Sumerian innovation was in transportation and infrastructure. The rivers that defined the region were both a blessing and a challenge. To facilitate movement, the Sumerians developed boats and barges capable of navigating the Tigris and Euphrates, transporting goods and people efficiently. They constructed roads and bridges to connect urban centers and surrounding agricultural areas. By integrating transportation with trade, agriculture, and urban planning, the Sumerians created a network that supported economic growth, cultural exchange, and political control. Medicine and science also benefited from Sumerian innovation. They developed knowledge of herbs, surgical techniques, and remedies to treat common ailments. Their writings included observations about human anatomy, disease, and hygiene, reflecting a systematic approach to understanding the body and its care. While primitive by modern standards, Sumerian medicine represented a significant step toward the development of scientific inquiry, demonstrating the application of observation, experimentation, and recorded knowledge to improve human life. The Sumerians also made strides in timekeeping and measurement. Observing celestial patterns, they divided the year into months based on lunar cycles and created calendars to track agricultural and religious events. This systematic approach to time allowed them to plan farming schedules, festivals, and civic activities with precision. Standardized units of measurement were applied to land, construction, and trade, enabling consistency and fairness in commerce and governance. By establishing these standards, the Sumerians created a framework for organization that would be emulated by civilizations for centuries to come. Education and knowledge preservation were integral to innovation in Sumer. The invention of writing allowed the establishment of schools, where young scribes learned to read, write, and perform calculations. Education was closely tied to administration, trade, religion, and science, ensuring that knowledge could be transmitted across generations. Libraries and archives preserved legal codes, religious texts, literary works, and technical manuals, creating a cumulative body of knowledge that supported further innovation. Sumerian education fostered intellectual growth and social stability, emphasizing the connection between literacy, governance, and technological advancement. The Sumerians' innovations were not isolated. They interacted with each other in ways that amplified their impact. Writing enabled record keeping for trade and legal matters, which in turn facilitated economic growth. Agricultural innovations supported urbanization, which created the need for governance, infrastructure, and education. Engineering and architectural advancements allowed the construction of monumental buildings and irrigation systems, while metallurgy and crafts enriched daily life and ceremonial practice. These interconnected innovations created a society that was far more advanced than its contemporaries, laying the foundation for the development of civilization itself. Perhaps most importantly, the Sumerians' inventions reflected their capacity for abstract thinking, planning, and foresight. They understood that human progress depended not only on immediate survival, but also on long-term planning, experimentation, and the accumulation of knowledge. Their innovations were deliberate responses to challenges posed by the environment, social organization, and economic demands, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of cause and effect, problem solving, and human potential. The legacy of Sumerian innovation extends far beyond Mesopotamia. Their writing influenced later cultures, including the Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians. Their mathematical systems became the foundation for subsequent developments in arithmetic, geometry, and astronomy. The wheel transformed transportation and trade across the ancient world. Their agricultural techniques, architectural methods, and governance models served as templates for civilizations that followed. The Sumerians did not simply invent tools and systems. They invented civilization itself, creating the structures, knowledge, and practices that allowed human societies to flourish. In examining the inventions and innovations of the Sumerians, we gain insight into the extraordinary capabilities of early human societies. The Sumerians combined observation, creativity, and practical problem solving to transform their world, leaving a legacy that continues to influence our lives today. From writing and mathematics to agriculture, engineering, and governance, their contributions shaped the trajectory of human history, demonstrating that innovation is not merely about technology. It is about vision, organization, and the relentless pursuit of improvement. The Sumerians' innovations remind us that civilization is the product of human ingenuity responding to environmental, social, and economic challenges. Each invention, whether the wheel, cuneiform, irrigation systems, or architectural marvels, was a solution to a real-world problem, grounded in necessity but extended by imagination. Their ability to adapt, experiment, and preserve knowledge created a society capable of unprecedented growth, complexity, and cultural richness. Ultimately, the Sumerians' inventions and innovations represent a triumph of human creativity and resilience. They show us that even in the distant past, people were capable of extraordinary achievements, building systems, tools, and knowledge that continue to shape our world. By studying the Sumerians, we learn not only about the origins of civilization, but also about the enduring human drive to innovate, improve, and leave a lasting mark on the world. Religion and culture were the lifeblood of Sumerian civilization, permeating every aspect of daily life, governance, and social organization. Unlike many later civilizations, where religion was often separate from the state, in Sumer, the spiritual and the political were intimately intertwined. From the moment a child was born until the day of their death, every action, decision, and social interaction was influenced by beliefs about the divine, the natural world, and the proper way to live in accordance with cosmic order. To understand the Sumerians fully, one must first understand their world view, a world view in which the gods governed all forces of nature, human destiny was entwined with divine favor, and cultural expression was a reflection of both earthly life and spiritual aspiration. The Sumerians were polytheistic, worshipping a pantheon of deities who were each responsible for different aspects of life and nature. Anu, the god of the sky, represented authority and cosmic order, while Enlil, the god of wind and storms, wielded power over both destruction and fertility. Enki, the god of water, wisdom, and creation, was believed to have guided humanity with knowledge and innovation. Inanna, the goddess of love, war, and fertility, was one of the most venerated deities, embodying both nurturing and destructive forces. Each city-state had its patron god or goddess, a deity whose favor was believed to protect the city, ensure prosperity, and sanction rulers. Religious devotion was not optional, it was a civic duty. Every act of governance, construction, trade, and agriculture was performed under the guidance and scrutiny of the gods, and neglecting divine observance could be seen as a threat to the city's survival. The central role of religion in Sumerian society is perhaps most vividly illustrated through their temples, the ziggurats. These towering structures, built from mud, brick, and sometimes faced with baked bricks, dominated the city skyline. Ziggurats were not merely architectural achievements, they were symbolic representations of the connection between heaven and earth. The temple at the summit housed the deity's cult statue and served as the center of ritual activity. Priests and priestesses who occupied the temple complex were responsible for performing daily offerings, conducting ceremonies, and maintaining the sacred spaces. These religious leaders also acted as administrators, managing temple estates, overseeing production, and coordinating labor for large-scale projects. In many ways, the ziggurat was the heart of the city, a spiritual, economic, and political hub that exemplified the integration of religion into all facets of urban life. Ritual and ceremony were central to Sumerian culture. Daily offerings of food, drink, and incense were made to appease the gods, while larger public festivals celebrated seasonal cycles, agricultural abundance, and divine myths. The Sumerians believed that the gods required attention, respect, and sustenance, and that proper worship would ensure cosmic balance and social stability. Temples employed teams of specialized workers to prepare offerings, maintain sacred objects, and perform music and dance as part of ceremonial rites. Music, particularly with lyres, drums, and pipes, played a significant role in religious expression, accompanying chants, hymns, and liturgical recitations. Dance and performance, often enacted during festivals, were a means of reinforcing communal identity, celebrating divine favor, and dramatizing mythological narratives for the broader population. The myths and stories of the Sumerians offer profound insight into their culture and worldview. Among the most famous is the Epic of Gilgamesh, a narrative that explores themes of heroism, friendship, mortality, and the search for eternal life. Gilgamesh, a historical king of Uruk, becomes a legendary figure whose adventures reflect both human aspiration and divine influence. The epic contains a flood story that closely parallels later narratives found in other civilizations, demonstrating the cultural transmission and enduring influence of Sumerian thought. Myths were not merely entertainment. They were moral and philosophical guides, offering lessons on human behavior, societal values, and the consequences of defying divine order. Religion also structured Sumerian social life. Marriage, family, and inheritance were all governed by laws and customs informed by spiritual beliefs. Festivals and rituals punctuated the agricultural calendar, marking planting, harvest, and seasonal changes. Citizens were expected to participate in temple activities, contribute offerings, and observe communal rites. Education, particularly for scribes and priests, included instruction in religious texts, liturgy, and the proper performance of ceremonies. This integration of spiritual, social, and intellectual life ensured that culture was holistic, encompassing practical governance, moral instruction, and artistic expression. Art and architecture reflected religious and cultural priorities. Statues of gods and goddesses, reliefs depicting mythological scenes, and intricately decorated ceremonial objects were common in temples and public spaces. Sculptures, often made from stone, clay, or precious metals, depicted divine figures with stylized features, emphasizing their otherworldly nature and authority. Murals and carvings illustrated stories of creation, heroic deeds, and cosmological events, serving both as decoration and as a form of visual pedagogy for the populace. Even everyday objects such as pottery, seals, and jewelry were often adorned with symbolic motifs reflecting religious beliefs, demonstrating the pervasive integration of spirituality into all aspects of life. The Sumerians also developed complex burial practices informed by religious beliefs. Tombs and graves often contained offerings for the afterlife, including food, tools, and valuables, reflecting the belief that life continued beyond death and that proper rituals ensured divine favor in the next world. Kings and high-ranking officials were sometimes buried with attendants or in elaborate tombs, signifying the intertwining of political authority, social status, and religious practice. Funerary rites reinforced social hierarchy while also reflecting the Sumerians' understanding of life, death, and cosmic order. Language and literature were integral to Sumerian culture. The invention of Cuneiform allowed for the recording of myths, hymns, legal codes, and administrative texts, preserving cultural knowledge for future generations. Literary works often combined religious and moral instruction with narrative entertainment, reflecting both the intellectual sophistication and spiritual concerns of the society. Sumerian literature addressed themes such as the relationship between humans and gods, ethical conduct, leadership, and the consequences of pride and hubris. These texts were not only read and recited in temples and schools, but also shaped cultural identity, reinforcing communal values and shared history. Education was closely tied to religion and culture. Scribes, priests, and administrators underwent extensive training in writing, mathematics, and religious practice. Schools, often associated with temples, taught the next generation to read and interpret cuneiform texts, perform rituals, and manage temple and state affairs. The knowledge was codified and transmitted systematically, ensuring that both religious and administrative expertise could support the continuity of society. Literacy was a means of preserving culture, governing communities, and maintaining the relationship between humans and the divine. Music, poetry, and performance were also vital expressions of culture. Hymns, chants, and ceremonial music were performed in temples and at public festivals, celebrating the gods, commemorating historical events, and reinforcing communal bonds. Instruments such as the lyre, drum, and pipes accompanied rituals and storytelling, enhancing the emotional and spiritual impact of cultural activities. Poetry and oral recitation were essential for transmitting myths, ethical lessons, and historical memory, ensuring that culture was both dynamic and enduring. craftsmanship and technological skill were intertwined with culture. Artisans produced objects that were both functional and symbolic, from finely crafted pottery and tools to ceremonial items used in religious rites. The quality, style, and symbolism of these objects reflected societal values, religious beliefs, and aesthetic principles. Innovation in craftsmanship was often motivated by religious or cultural requirements, demonstrating how creativity and spiritual devotion were mutually reinforcing. Sumerian culture was also marked by its attention to the natural world. Their myths, rituals, and agricultural practices reflected an intimate understanding of environmental cycles, celestial patterns, and seasonal changes. The observation of stars and planetary movements informed calendars, festivals, and agricultural planning. The Sumerians believed that harmony with nature and adherence to divine patterns were essential for prosperity, reinforcing a world in which humans were both stewards of the land and accountable to higher powers. Political organization and culture were deeply connected. Rulers derived legitimacy through religious sanction, and their authority was reinforced by participation in ritual and temple construction. Governance, law, and religious practice were mutually supportive, creating a cohesive society in which cultural, spiritual, and administrative activities were integrated. Public ceremonies, festivals, and processions allowed rulers to display power while simultaneously honoring the gods, blending governance with cultural expression. The Sumerians also cultivated intellectual curiosity within the framework of their religion and culture. Observations of nature, astronomy, and mathematics were often tied to understanding divine order and timing rituals accurately. Knowledge of irrigation, architecture, and trade was enhanced by careful record keeping, calculation, and experimentation, demonstrating the interconnection between cultural priorities and technological advancement. In Sumer, culture was not an abstract ideal. It was a practical and spiritual guide for organizing society, managing resources, and understanding the cosmos. Daily life, art, governance, and spiritual practice were inseparable in Sumerian culture. Citizens participated in ceremonies, maintained religious obligations, engaged in craft and trade, and adhered to social norms reinforced by myth and ritual. Education, writing, and artistic expression preserved knowledge, reinforced morality, and strengthened communal identity. Festivals, music, literature, and visual arts created a vibrant, dynamic culture that reflected both the practical needs and the spiritual aspirations of the society. The legacy of Sumerian religion and culture extends far beyond Mesopotamia. Their myths influenced later civilizations. Their artistic styles inspired neighboring cultures, and their literary and religious texts laid the foundation for moral and philosophical thought in the ancient world. The integration of religion with governance, education, and daily life provided a model for subsequent societies, demonstrating the enduring power of cultural cohesion, spiritual devotion, and creative expression. Through their religious beliefs and cultural practices, the Sumerians created a society in which human experience was inseparable from the divine and the artistic. They demonstrated that culture is not merely entertainment or ritual. It is a framework for understanding the world, guiding behavior, and sustaining civilization. Their achievements in literature, art, architecture, music, and education illustrate how deeply culture and spirituality shape human life, and their influence continues to resonate through history. By examining Sumerian religion and culture, we gain insight into the values, priorities, and world view of one of the earliest civilizations in human history. We see a society that revered the gods, honored the natural and cosmic order, and expressed its beliefs through art, literature, ritual, and governance. The Sumerians remind us that culture is both a product of human ingenuity and a guiding force for shaping communities, advancing knowledge, and preserving collective memory. The legacy of the Sumerians is one of the most profound and enduring in human history. While their civilization arose over 6,000 years ago in the southern plains of Mesopotamia, their contributions continue to resonate in countless aspects of modern life. From governance and law to writing, mathematics, urban planning, and culture, the Sumerians laid the foundation for the development of civilization itself. Their achievements were not isolated. They were cumulative, interconnected, and transmitted through generations, influencing subsequent cultures across the Middle East and beyond. To understand their legacy is to understand the roots of human progress and the enduring impact of innovation, organization, and creativity. One of the most tangible aspects of the Sumerian legacy is their invention of writing. The development of cuneiform transformed human society in ways that cannot be overstated. Before writing, knowledge was limited to oral transmission, vulnerable to loss and distortion. With cuneiform, the Sumerians created a method to record, preserve, and communicate information across time and space. They documented trade transactions, agricultural production, legal codes, religious texts, and literary works, creating a written record that allowed society to function on a far more complex level. Writing enabled the emergence of administration, law, education, and literature. It allowed Sumerians to organize their cities, govern effectively, and accumulate knowledge. Later civilizations, including the Akkadians, Babylonians, Assyrians, and even peoples far beyond Mesopotamia, built upon this system. The very concept of recording human experience, preserving history, and codifying knowledge owes its origins, in part, to the Sumerians. The influence of Sumerian governance is equally significant. The concept of the city-state, with organized administration, codified laws, and centralized authority, became a model for future civilizations. Sumerian rulers, often sanctioned by the gods, were responsible for maintaining order, managing resources, and protecting their people. This combination of political and religious authority set a precedent for governance systems in Mesopotamia and beyond. Laws, such as those recorded in the Code of Ur-Nammu, the earliest known legal code, established principles of justice, social responsibility, and accountability. These codes influenced subsequent legal traditions, including the more famous Code of Hammurabi. By creating structured governance and codifying laws, the Sumerians demonstrated that civilization thrives not merely through survival or conquest, but through organization, fairness, and the rule of law. The Sumerians' achievements in mathematics and science also contributed significantly to their enduring legacy. Their sexagesimal base 60 numerical system gave rise to concepts still used today, such as the 60, second minute, the 60-minute hour, and the 360-degree circle. They applied mathematics to solve practical problems in trade, construction, and astronomy, demonstrating that abstract knowledge could serve concrete needs. Their observations of celestial bodies enabled the creation of calendars, which were crucial for agriculture, religious festivals, and civic planning. Astronomy and mathematics, nurtured by the Sumerians, became pillars for later civilizations in Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, and beyond, shaping the development of science, navigation, and engineering. Agricultural innovation was another cornerstone of their enduring influence. The Sumerians transformed the plains of southern Mesopotamia through advanced irrigation techniques, canals, levees, and reservoirs, creating reliable food production systems that supported dense populations. By mastering water management, crop rotation, and storage, they enabled urbanization, trade, and societal specialization. The principles of irrigation and agricultural planning pioneered by the Sumerians were adopted and refined by subsequent civilizations, influencing practices in Egypt, the Indus Valley, and other riverine cultures. Their ability to harness the natural environment for human benefit set a template for civilizations seeking to thrive in challenging landscapes. Urban planning and architecture are also central to the Sumerian legacy. Their cities, such as Uruk, and Lagash, featured planned streets, public spaces, temples, and administrative buildings, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of spatial organization. Ziggurats, the monumental temple complexes, were architectural marvels that combined religious, administrative, and social functions. These innovations influenced later Mesopotamian architecture, including the pyramidal structures of Babylon and Assyria, and even inspired architectural thinking in distant cultures. The Sumerians demonstrated that cities could be centers of human activity, creativity, and governance, setting the stage for urban civilization as a defining feature of human progress. Cultural achievements in literature, art, and religion form another enduring element of Sumerian legacy. Their myths, hymns, and epics, including the Epic of Gilgamesh, have survived for millennia, influencing storytelling traditions in neighboring civilizations and providing insight into human concerns such as mortality, heroism, friendship, and the divine. Artistic expressions, from sculpture and reliefs to pottery and jewelry, revealed technical mastery and aesthetic sensibility that inspired future Mesopotamian cultures. Religion, with its integration into governance, daily life, and education, provided a framework for social cohesion and cultural continuity. Through their cultural contributions, the Sumerians established enduring paradigms for expressing human experience, codifying values, and creating collective identity. Trade and economic innovation were vital aspects of their legacy. The Sumerians developed standardized weights, measures, and accounting methods, enabling complex commerce both within and between city-states. Their trade networks extended far beyond Mesopotamia, reaching Anatolia, the Persian Gulf, and possibly the Indus Valley, exchanging goods such as grain, textiles, metals, and timber. By creating a structured and reliable system for trade, the Sumerians facilitated economic growth, cultural exchange, and technological diffusion. This understanding of commerce as an organized, regulated, and socially integrated activity influenced economic practices in subsequent civilizations, laying the foundation for the development of markets, taxation, and financial management. One cannot overlook the Sumerians' contributions to technology and innovation. Their inventions, writing, the wheel, plow, irrigation systems, boats, and metallurgy transformed human capability. The wheel revolutionized transportation and trade. The plow increased agricultural efficiency. Boats and canals enhanced commerce and connectivity. Metallurgy provided tools, weapons, and ceremonial objects. These innovations were cumulative and interconnected, creating a society capable of sustained growth, urbanization, and cultural achievement. Later civilizations inherited, adapted, and expanded these technologies, demonstrating the long-term impact of Sumerian ingenuity on human progress. The Sumerians' approach to education and knowledge preservation also constitutes a lasting legacy. By training scribes, priests, and administrators, they ensured that writing, mathematics, law, and religious knowledge were passed across generations. Libraries, schoolhouses, and archives preserved both practical and literary knowledge, enabling cumulative cultural and technological advancement. This emphasis on education literacy, and record keeping established a model for the administration, intellectual life, and cultural continuity that would shape later civilizations, from Babylon and Assyria to classical Greece and beyond. Even in social organization, the Sumerians left a profound impact. Their hierarchical yet flexible system allowed for specialization, social mobility, and the integration of various economic, religious, and administrative functions. Labor was organized to maintain agriculture, craft production, trade, temple functions, and urban infrastructure. Governance, law, and religion were integrated into social systems, ensuring order, stability, and cultural continuity. This model of structured, multi-tiered society influenced subsequent cultures, providing a framework for managing large populations, sustaining cities, and balancing the needs of different social classes. The influence of Sumerian religion and mythology on subsequent civilizations is particularly notable.